What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the College Football Print Factory Show. We are here. We're breaking down the college football slate. We got Michigan. We got Washington. Battle of Unbeatens should be a fun time. No, whoever is acting like me in the chat, and I got to find it. Where is it? I am not the reason we're late. It's all Big T. I will not apologize for being tardy. He'll do that when it becomes his turn. But we'll go to Bruce first. The guy who runs our college football content over here at Run Pure Sports. He's got the Showdown playbook up for the people, breaking it all down. Bruce, how are you doing? And, of course, you're not happy that Texas ended up taking the L to Washington. But I will say I think we have a great game regardless.
Yeah, I agree. Two best teams are here, in my opinion. Washington looked great last week, so did Michigan. Milroe looked horrible. Michigan made them look even worse. So, I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a great game, and there's a couple different scripts you can play in this showdown. So, I'm looking forward to discussing it with you guys.
Yep, looking forward to breaking it all down. We got Bryce up next. Bryce, how are you doing? Obviously, the football season just ended for NFL, but we got playoffs coming up. We got the championship game tonight. So how pumped are you for the game?
This is like one of my favorite slates of the year. Championship Monday. Kind of brings more people to college football who don't normally play. So see some weirder shit out there, I guess. Plus, it's 200,000 first. DraftKings really stepped up and made it like a really good flagship GPP. So that was nice.
All right, and up next is our guy, Big T. He is repping the sponsor of the show, Donato's, I believe, on the T-shirt right now. So, Donato's, go grab a slice today. But, Big T, how are you doing? Apologize to the people for being tardy, and excited to have you here. I'm sure you're pumped for this game.
Yeah, sorry for being late. It was my fault today. I can't blame anyone else, so it was my fault. But the good news is I was studying the slate early for once, and I feel good about it. And like Bryce said, $200K up top for $20, amazing. 555 with 50K up top, pretty amazing too. Some higher stakes, and the $4, 60K prize pool to $6. Just so many contests, which is awesome. And the way they're setting up now, I think they'll get close to filling, but you never know. You never know how that goes with the college stuff. Some states can't play. You might see some overlay. I doubt it though. Everything always ends up filling when it gets closer to it, especially for a game like this. And just looking at the pricing and stuff tonight, I think the chalk team is pretty obvious, which is great for tournaments because you're going to be able to do some things in tournaments to get to the top of the leaderboard. And I just think it's a great slate. Like Bryce said too, I love this slate every year. You get some casuals that haven't really followed. They might have followed the teams, but they haven't followed the players. No one knows these guys better than Bruce and the rest of the people we got in the Discord and stuff on the site. So I don't know. And Showdown's a different format than full slates too, where you got to dig down in there and find a few pieces that might not have done much during the year. I remember 2 years ago or 3 years ago, even Bruce had a tight end that no one had that ended up just crushing. Actually, 2 years ago, Hofbrau won with a backup tight end too. So I think 2 of the last 3 years of shitty tight end won the whole slate. But that's where we're going to dig in. Anyone can go in there and play Blake Corum, Penix, these receivers. It's a matter of who you play at the bottom that is going to get you different tonight and get you to the top of the leaderboard.
Yep, that's why we got Bruce's playbook over here at Rum Pure Sports. Use that code New Year, get you 15% off. And we have a golf-only package. If you are in the golf streets, which our guy Wiley hit on an outright for Chris Kirk, so congrats to him on that. And also congrats to our guy Bruce. You've been on the Chris Kirk call. How much money did you make off that one, Bruce?
And a good amount. I forget exactly the number, but it was had 4 zeros at the end at least. So.
You can't beat that, especially to start the year. We got the new golf stuff kicking off. It's nothing funner than shipping an outright right out of the gate. And we had a ton of DFS winners too on top of it. It was a great week all around.
Yeah, hashtag how rich. I can't remember how much I won. That's a great feeling. So, I hope I could say that at the end of tonight. I hope I can be like, shout out Bruce. I don't know how much I won, but I won a ton. So that's my hope tonight. But golf stuff is great. So again, if you want to just sign up for golf only, use that code Andy15, get you 15% off, and you do golf only if you want. But if you're watching this, you probably want all the sports. And of course, we got NFL football coming up this weekend with all the showdown stuff. And if you like college football showdown, you're going to love the NFL playoff showdown stuff. So listen, let's dive right in. I'm going to turn this around real quick. Before we go to Bruce first, Tony, you said you have been diving into the research. I believe I saw you. Were you at your local Fridays breaking it all down? It looked like you were at Fridays. That is my guess. That is my prediction. And you were going through the slate. So how about you give us the slate overview before we kind of go to Bruce and really break it all down?
Yeah, I was not Fridays. I was at a hole-in-the-wall spot, but good burgers and good spot to find some winners. So that's where I like the hole-in-the-wall spots. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's a pretty obvious slate. Like, everyone's going to want to play Corum at the top, Penix, obviously, like I said. But you have some clear cheap value, too. Like, God, what's his price? Let me find his price real quick. Johnson, 3,800. Everyone, and some of the ownerships are just wrong. I looked all around the industry. I sent a tweet about this, but the ownerships are just wrong. Like, in the utility, all these places have Cornelius Johnson pretty high, but I mean, I think just everyone's going to be playing a guy like that at that price point. He's got to be a cash lock, I'm sure, right, Bryce? It's got.
I see lineups without him. To be honest, I don't think you need to play Johnson, but I mean,
I was going to take it even a step further. Like, I think he's a pretty bad tournament play at this ownership. I mean, it's not like he's been some world beater or something. So, like, when you play a guy like that tonight on this slate, like, don't think you're surprising people, because with his price tag, everyone needs cheap plays to get these good guys in. I mean, look at his game logs. His biggest game of the year is 15. He's got a ton of single-digit games. And in a game like this, I mean, single digits isn't getting it done. I don't really care unless they're super cheap, like 1K or something. But he's more expensive. I think we can find better plays. And another thing that we found in the past is they just can't project kickers properly. It's almost like the NFL like 4 years ago, where the kickers would be 3K. No one would really play them, and people won't play them tonight just looking at the projections. They're just going to score more than that. I don't see how you can project these guys for like 7 or 8. I would have to project them for more than that. So that's clear-cut value that I don't think will be owned. And, I mean, when we go position by position, we can dive into some sneakier spots. But I think the build's very clear. Corum, Cornelius, Penix, one receiver from Washington, maybe dip down for a value. I mean, it's very, very clear build, at least for the chalk.
Yeah, and Big T's not saying that's going to be his core. He's just saying that's like the path that people are going.
Definitely not my core.
Yeah. We're going to go game by game. We're going to go position by position right now. We're going to break it all down, and we're going to kick it off with the quarterback position first, Bruce. Obviously, if you look at quarterbacks, there is one in Michael Penix that a lot of people are going to like. He's a great play. Not exactly a runner, right? Definitely more of a passer. Sure, he could run if he needs to. It's a championship game. You know, these quarterbacks run a little bit more in these moments, but Penix is the most expensive guy on the board, followed by the third most expensive guy in JJ McCarthy. And listen, I'm not saying JJ McCarthy is a great quarterback, but I think against the defense against Washington, I do think he can put up points, right? The question is, how does he do compared to Penix, Corum, Adunze? We also got McMillan, who's cheap. You got Polk, who's feels a little overpriced. Roman Wilson. There's a lot of studs on this slate where you could make a case that a McCarthy is kind of like on an NFL showdown slate, like a Joe Flacco who feels expensive, right? One of those guys just can't move as much, right? I know Flacco was on the winner in one of the showdowns, but you guys get the point I'm getting at is McCarthy feels expensive and Penix feels like a plug-and-play guy that a lot of people are just going to naturally play. How are you looking at the quarterback position on this showdown slate, Bruce?
Yeah, I feel like I'm gonna lock Penix tonight. I just think he's best play. Besides, unless you're playing the script that Michigan just runs the ball all over Washington, they can't do anything else. I think they're able to move the ball through the air. So 15 tickets for tonight's contest. So I'm gonna probably be locking Penix and playing with the receiver or two. McCarthy's going to be, I think he's going to be lower owned than what most people think, what most sites think. And, if you're playing that script where, like Washington gets up a few touchdowns and, they're not able to run as effectively as expected, McCarthy's going to have to do a little bit more with his arm. Like he did last week. I don't think they were able to run the ball as well as they would have liked last week against Bama. This Washington defensive line is a lot worse than that Bama defensive line. So, yeah, in teams where I don't have quorum, I'll probably have McCarthy and a receiver, just because I'm playing a different script than how most will see it. So, definitely going to go there. I think he's pretty talented, but the offense doesn't let him throw the ball down the field. I think as the years gone on, his ADOT has gotten lower. His average on the year is like 10-yard ADOT, and I think the last few games it was like 7. So he's going to have to push the ball down the field if they're not able to run the football. So I'll be going there in those scripts.
All right, Bruce, either your burners in the chat or your wife is getting frisky on a Monday morning. She might be excited that college football season's over, but nice comments over about Bruce. But let's go over to Bryce next. Bryce, quarterback tonight, right? Obviously, it's a Penix kind of day. Is it a Penix and the captain flex? What are you kind of doing overall with Penix and McCarthy?
I think McCarthy's definitely going to be the lowest owned, expensive guy here. I think a Dunze even comes in higher owned than him. But we were talking about it before the show. Corum's minus 400 to score. He's even the money to score twice. So if those points come from someone, if they come through the air and they're not as successful on the ground as Bruce said, I think that'll be different. I think my main question was whether I was going to play any quarterback captain or just go with the skill players in the big GPP. If I do that, I would likely make a rule where it's you play at least one of the QBs, so you're not just stuck with always having skill players. I think the best way to get different here is what Tony said. It's you don't need to go crazy captains. You can go with some of these 1K guys that Bruce wrote up on the playbook. I know I was looking at probably being over on Will Nixon. Tyler Morris is playable. This Mullings guy is playable. I think Barnard is going to be the cheap, the chalkier cheap guy. I think Morgan's playable. And I have these guys almost as high owned as Cornelius Johnson, just because I think Cornelius is going to come in too high. I think he's a fine play at flex. I think he's going to be way over owned in the captain spot. The dude scored 1 TD all year. In college, you typically get there will be tons of random points, but the studs normally still crush. So I would kind of be a little more limited to playing the best players at captain, and then trying to get different down below.
Yep, I agree with that with the captains. The quarterbacks and the captains is going to be a big debate. For me, I don't think I'm going to get Danny McCarthy at captain, but you could make a case that, hey, if McCarthy at captain wins, it's probably going to be more of the Michigan onslaught and all the Washington fails. So it'd probably be a more 4-2 or 5-1 builds. Big T, I'll go to you next. Quarterback, obviously, Penix and JJ McCarthy, both really great plays. I don't think you have to make a huge stand at the quarterback position, but maybe you are. Are you making a stand here, or are you playing just a ton of Penix and McCarthy?
Yeah, I think a lot of what you guys said. Penix is, I don't see how you don't play him tonight. And the captain's a different story, but college is different than pro too. There's just more ways to get there in college. He could spread it around 5 different guys. They have so many good weapons on Washington. And McCarthy, if they load up to stop Corum, he could sling it around too. I think people are going to be too focused on Michigan's how they played all year. Look at their games last year in the playoff too. The TCU game totally nuked. Oh, they lost that game, so that was the only one. But we've seen it in the past. They play Iowa and Wisconsin and all these teams that can't throw all year, and they come into a game like this, and people just think Michigan's going to slow them down. Alabama had 0 receivers and a quarterback that can't throw. Now they face a quarterback that can throw to everybody all around the yard with 3 NFL receivers and NFL talent all around the field, and the number 1 O-line in college football. I don't see how they're not going to be a ton of points tonight, and I don't see the game going the way other people see it going. So I want the quarterbacks. And I think I like McCarthy almost more than Corum, just because I think Washington tries to load up and slow him down and make him throw it, especially if Washington can get the lead. I mean, what happens when Washington goes out 2 touchdowns or something early? McCarthy's going to be very under-owned just based on the projections. And I think you can use him. I don't like him as much in the captain as Penix just because there's more routes. But I think he can, at least on some teams, just because no one's going to play him. I mean, no one's going to have McCarthy. It's just the way the build sets up. It's tough to play Corum and McCarthy together with the way the game should go. So you almost have to choose, and everyone's going to choose Corum. It's just, I mean, when you run just naked optimizers, it's all Blake Corum in the captain and in the flex, which is fine. But it gives us an opportunity to get different playing a quarterback. How often can you get different by playing quarterbacks? And I think you can tonight, especially McCarthy. And I think he could have a big game tonight.
Yeah, the one point that you brought up that I think is really good is when you play Iowa every game, you just hand the ball off. But like if McCarthy has to be pushed, it's going to be different. And that's going to make it interesting for someone like Roman Wilson, who we'll get to, that I think is a really good tournament play.
Same exact thought as McCarthy with him. No one's going to play him at that price.
No one is. I think he's a very, very good play today. But we'll get to that. We also got our guy, Mitch Snyder and Steve Boy in both on the overs. Good to see these guys arm in arm rather than fighting about Ponzi schemes in our Run Pure Sports chat. Good times over there. But let's keep moving along. Let's go to running back. Bruce, I want to talk about running back with you. The reason why I want to talk running back is obviously Blake Corum, one of the best players on the board. No one is going to say that Blake Corum's a bad play. The question is, how do we handle him in the captain spot? Is he just a lock in the flex? And then what on earth are we doing with Dylan Johnson and this Washington situation? Because Dylan Johnson got carted off the field the other day, right? I mean, not a lot of guys get carted off and then play the next week. Yes, it's a championship game. And when it's a championship game, listen, he doesn't want to miss this game. He might go out there, start running, and just be an absolute disaster. And they might just bail on him. So I think that figuring out this Washington running back situation could be a huge thing to figure out on this slate. So what are the answers you got for us?
Yeah, I think this game is going to go along the same lines of their game against Maryland early in the year. Well, actually late in the year, I think it was week 12, where they gave Corum like 28 carries. He had under 100 yards, I think 98 total yards, scored a couple touchdowns. So, if he does that tonight, he could be optimal captain, and you'll want to have a good amount there. I think he's going to be close to 100% owned this evening, maybe 90% or so. So yeah, maybe go a little underweight in the captain and just hope for the best, and play some of these Washington plays in the captain spot, receivers, and maybe some Penix as well. Dylan Johnson's the interesting one for me. It looked bad last week with his leg injury. Not sure if it was ankle or knee, but it just didn't look good. He got carted off. He's been dealing with it the last couple games, but just looked like it got hurt worse than before. He's going to be low owned, so maybe if it was just nothing at all, like his coach says, then you have a low owned guy that could smash like he did against Texas last week. So that's an interesting play. If he doesn't go, Tybo Rogers and Will Nixon would probably get a lot of the work. Tybo came in after him, and then Will Nixon's kind of a pass catching back transfer from Snyder's and AP's Nebraska, where he was like a wide receiver running back hybrid. So you could see him a little bit more, I think, if Washington falls behind. I think Edwards and Mullings are both interesting for Michigan, just because they've been getting more run. Edwards got 30% of the snaps last week. Mullings looked good, just only played 10%. But I think maybe they trust him a little bit more than they did early in the year, and he's healthy, so that helps as well. If you're playing that blowout script, maybe Edwards or maybe Mullings get some more run. Edwards is more of the pass catching guy, has a 10% target share this season as well for Michigan. So he's interesting if you're playing that script.
All right. Bryce, I'll go over to you. Obviously, like Bruce just rattled off a ton of running backs, which is why I think you kind of mentioned earlier, hey, let's get different with some of these cheap options, right? Let's kind of mix and match some stuff down there. Who are some of the running backs you're looking to go to, especially with this Dylan Johnson injury lurking?
Well, first off, I mean, I'm kind of going to have a file that'll be overweight on Dylan Johnson and a file that'll be underweight, like just based on how he looks in pregame. Like, there's a chance that like he can only play like, I don't know, like 20% of the snaps here, or he just like re-injures it immediately. Like, he would not be playing if this wasn't the national championship. I mean, last week it looked super ugly. The thing about their backups is it's not like Tybo is cheap. So like it makes me really like a guy like Nixon as a punt to be over on. Like, I mean, if he gets the run, he's gonna be optimal, is the thing. Like, there's no way he doesn't catch like a couple passes. And if you're getting, I don't know, I'd probably say it would take like 8 points, maybe less for one of these cheap guys to be like the optimal guy. And if he ends up like being their pass catching running back, I mean, he could easily get there just on receptions alone. I mean, Blake Corum. There's not really. I'm trying to find reasons to fade him. I mean, the only reason really to fade him, in my opinion, would just be to get different. I mean, the guy's an absolute smash play every week. He has crazy TD odds here, but I don't know. I'm playing him like the same amount as McCarthy personally. So I'll probably be underweight on Corum, overweight on McCarthy, and then depending on how this Washington situation shakes out, I'll probably be well overweight on Will Nixon. Tybo's a little harder for me to get to because, like, even if he gets the run, he's not guaranteed optimal at 5.4. And, like, if Dylan Johnson looks good in warmups, I think he could go super under-owned here. No one wants to play running backs against Michigan. So that's likely how it shakes out for me.
All right. Good points there. If you do fade Corum today, right, one way it could work is, hey, if he got hurt, I'm not saying he does, but one slate that I shipped was when Jameson Williams got hurt way back. I thought I was going to be dust. He looked great, felt like an idiot, and then it happened, right? So, hey, sometimes you get lucky with that. Not saying we're hoping for, but those things happen at times. But I don't know. Maybe there's enough guys to be able to fade Blake Corum here. Tony, I think Blake Corum is a guy that I like being under or maybe even with the fielding captain. I don't feel like it's a spot where I just want to play the top captain and go completely overweight on. And then Dylan Johnson, I'm also kind of thinking about being just under on him. Now, I know his status throughout the next 4 or 5 hours could change some of my opinions, but I think overall I want to be at least more over on Corum, I think, in the flex, more under in the captain. I think I want to just be under on Johnson in general because it'll allow me to get a lot of those Washington receivers who we'll get to, and it'll help me mix in some of these Washington running backs as well.
Yeah, I think I have my strongest takes for running back just because I feel like there's edges on this slate. Like, I mean, some of these places have Dylan Johnson, or is that his name, Johnson? Why does that sound weird when I said it? They haven't projected like 45% in some of these sites, 30%. Like, there's no way anyone's playing him with the injury. So, like Bryce said, I agree with him. Like, look at the warm-ups. If he's moving decent at all, I want to be over on him. He's been a stud all year in these big games. He wants to play. It looked terrible last week, so we definitely need to get a live look at him because if he doesn't look good in warm-ups, then I'll just probably fade him and make it easy just because he's expensive. But if he's moving around at all, I think he's a great play tonight just because literally no one's playing him. And he's not that expensive anyways. If he was healthy, he'd be popular. So I think we need to watch that. And I mean, Corum's Corum, like Bryce said, where I like him, obviously, but everyone likes him. He's going to be like 100% owned. He's going to be massively owned in the captain. I want to be under on both. I want to be under on the captain and under on the field. that doesn't mean I don't like him. I think he can get 20 and we can still beat him pretty easy. So, and I do think Washington's going to try to slow him down as much as they can, and I think they'll be successful. I don't see Michigan just running up and down the field with Corum tonight. That's not how I see this game going. So I agree with a lot of the stuff Schlong said, where I want to be pretty even. I might even literally go 50-50 McCarthy, Corum, and that would put me way under on Corum. And I know it is risky, but you don't ship things without getting a little bit risky here and there with slates like this. So I like the McCarthy. And the rest of the running backs, honestly, I think I'm fading. I mean, Edwards has sucked all year. Edwards has been awful all year, and people are going to play him because they like Michigan. His price is pretty decent. They still remember last year in the playoff, he had a monster game in the TCU game. People think he just hasn't looked good all year. He hasn't done anything. I don't want him. I played Mullings last week. I'm not playing his dusty ass. Tybo's too expensive. And then Nixon, I could play Nixon. I just because of his price. He's $1,200. A lot of things could happen, especially even more so if Dillon looks bad at all to us in the pregame. But I don't love him either. I like a lot of cheap receivers when we get there, and I think it's a passing script tonight. So I'm going to be way under on running backs, except for Dillon. If he looks good, I'll be over on.
And Nixon of the cheapies is my favorite. Not super high on Edwards, like you said. Bruce, one last question, and then we'll go to receivers. If Washington's doing a 2-minute drill, I think you could make an argument that if Johnson gets banged up throughout the game or is just banged up, you could argue 2-minute drill, Johnson's not in there, right? Who would be the 2-minute drill guy on Washington? Because I think that could be very beneficial.
Yeah, not really sure. I'll have to see if there's any situations where that happened. But you would think they would go.
Gotta be Tybo.
Yeah, Tybo did come in late last week, so yeah, it could be him. I know Nixon is a better pass catcher. I don't know where they stand in terms of pass blocking, because I know that's a big deal too. But it's something for me to look for, I guess, before the slate starts, and I'll throw that in the chat as well.
One of the reasons I just remembered when Bruce was talking, one of the reasons I like to be under on those running backs is I actually think Jeremy could play in that role too, where they put him in the backfield and throw some dump offs to him if it gets hairy out there. So I like Jeremy more than those running backs, and he's not much more expensive. I mean, he's gone for 2 good games the last 2 games and the biggest games of the year for them. So I like him more than those running backs, even in that same role.
The Jeremy thing's a great point. He definitely has been used in that role at times, so I like that. Also, we got Perky Bump Sanderson has insider info. He said Washington money line wins. I don't know if I agree with that, but I don't know if I'm also going to take inside info from
Perky Bumps.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm taking inside info from a guy named Perky Bump Sanderson. That's just my take there. But let's keep moving this thing along. Let's go to the receiver position. There's a lot to talk about at receiver. Clearly, with Washington, right, you got a Dunze at 9.8. Polk at 8.8 and McMillan at 7.2. McMillan clearly is the underpriced guy here, which that could reflect ownership. Polk feels like the lowest owned of the 3, and then Dunze feels like the best raw points guy. If you had to just pick the guy that's going to be the best performer on the slate, right? That's kind of how you break it down with Washington. And then from there, you got a ton of tight ends. Bruce will get into those guys and all the other receivers. Then we got Michigan, Roman Wilson. Like, he is 9K, and that feels egregious, but if they are going to pass a bit more, I mean, Roman Wilson, it's likely him. And then there's Loveland at 6'4", who's not a bad option too, right? Those are the main 2 receivers that should likely benefit. Then you have Johnson, we talked about as the value at 3.8 that people could gravitate towards. Bruce, how do you break this all down? Because clearly we got to figure out what's going on with these Washington receivers. I think ownership is going to be very important between all these options. And then how do you handle the Michigan receivers where they're not going to get as much ownership because everyone's playing core?
Yeah, and Michigan did something interesting last week against Bama. They kind of opened things up, went 3 or 4 wide receivers a lot more often than they usually do. They had Tyler Morris and Samaj Morgan out there a little bit more than they usually do. And it was interesting to see them kind of open it up a little bit. Which I don't think they'll have to do that in this game unless they fall behind a few touchdowns. think their game plan is going to be to try and pound the football. And, if they're successful doing that, they're just going to stick with it like they always do. For some reason they aren't. You'll see a lot of targets to Roman Wilson and Cornelius Johnson, the two receivers. They love going 2 tight ends, 2 receivers. And then, if they don't, then they'll bring in Morris or Samaj Morgan, which are 2 of the playmakers. And, they're cheap. Tyler Morris is $3K, got 30% of the snaps last week. And then Samaj Morgan, 20%, and has 2 touchdowns on the year. And I think he's looked the best. If I'm going to pay for a cheap Michigan receiver, it'd be him. And then, of course, the tight ends. Michigan's tight ends are elite. Loveland is one of the best in the country. Washington has given up 10 points per game to tight ends, which is crazy. Just because I think their rush defense has been terrible this year. Jatavian Sanders scored, I think, like 13 or 14 DK last week on them. So I think Loveland can do the same as well, especially if they're able to run the ball effectively. He's going to be open a lot. He was on the field 70% of snaps last week. AJ Barner is not really a receiving threat as much as Loveland is, but he's on the field 80% of the time as well. So, he's also a good value play down there. Odunze, Polk, and McMillan are all studs. With Polk and Odunze on the outside, Polk scored a touchdown last week. Had 5 targets. Target share is pretty even for all of them, 5, 6, and 5 last week. So should be close to the same again. I think Odunze is the most talented of the 3, with McMillan right behind him. McMillan more in the slot, so his ADOT is about 10, where the others are about 16. So, more upside in Polk and Odunze, in my opinion. McMillan kind of the safer guy. So, it's looking for a lower owned receiver, probably Polk. He's going to be half the ownership, maybe even more. Maybe probably even more than that, just because of the price. He's only 1K less than Odunze, and everybody knows Odunze's name. They don't know Polk, so that ownership's going to be a lot less. And I like that, especially in tournaments. Big T mentioned Bernard as well. Still getting a third of the snaps. Has 2 touchdowns on the year. Played for Michigan State before this, so if you want to play that revenge narrative thing, maybe he gets a little revenge on Michigan tonight.
There you go. I can always get behind a good revenge narrative, Bruce. So I'm in. Like the Bernard call for sure. Bryce, let's go to you. Obviously the Washington receivers, we know the rankings, right? Odunze, Polk, or Odunze, McMillan, and then probably Polk's how a lot of people rank them. But ownership's going to be key with that. How do you break down the Michigan receivers and also some of these Washington ones?
So, I think Odunze is the best play of the group by far. He's like probably top 3 receiver and one of the most loaded receiver drafts like of all time. So, it guy's an NFL talent. There's no doubt about that. Polk and Roman Wilson are going to be the 2 like super low owned guys, I think, just because they're absurdly expensive. Like McMillan projects better than Polk, and he's like 2K cheaper. So if you want to get different, I think Polk and Wilson are a good way to get different. I'll likely be overweight in GPPs there. Little more interest in Polk than Wilson, but you're automatically getting leverage on Corum if you're playing some of these Michigan receivers, with the exception of like Cornelius Johnson, because he fits pretty well with Corum. So I know it's tough to get to Wilson and Polk here, but I think they're solid tournament plays. I think both tight ends are viable here, Loveland and Westover. And, you can even drop down to an AJ Barner. He's definitely going to be in my pool as one of the cheap guys that we like. the thing I'm struggling with here is like whether to play any quarterbacks at captain, because that kind of affects like the ownership on some of these skill guys. Both quarterbacks can spread it around enough to where, like, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if Penix throws for like 350 and 3 touchdowns, all to different people. So it's kind of hard for me to remove the QB as the captain because that's kind of affecting my ownership of the wide receivers. In cash, I wouldn't touch any of Polk or Wilson. I think you can definitely play a Dunsey and McMillan on the same team. I don't think that's an issue. We've been playing McMillan all year, and 7.2 for him just seems way too cheap. I know in theory he's not doesn't have tons of upside, but say Washington's trailing, the guy's going to rack up PPR points. I'm not going to play any 5-1 tonight. I think even if Corum runs all over Washington, they're still going to get PPR points. So trailing. So I think 5-1 builds are pretty bad tonight. I won't be playing any of those.
Yeah, I also love the McMillan and captain. I just think his price is too cheap. And sometimes when you decide not to dip all the way up to the top cap and you just dip down a little bit lower, you can get some really interesting builds that get you an extra stud in there, which could be worth it. So I do like the McMillan captain idea. I just think he's one of the most underpriced guys on the slate. It does feel like. Big T, I will slide on over to you. Before we do that, though, Bringing the Noise is asking, why don't they show targets in the CFB game logs? Bringing the Noise, you've been playing CFB long enough. We do not get information about guys playing. I mean, I'm not trying to put this into existence, but what if Dylan Johnson just randomly didn't play? That's how college football is. He'll probably play tonight, but you get what I'm saying.
It's tough during the regular season. It's tough. It's easy to hide stuff. It's going to be tough to hide it tonight.
Yeah,
there's too many eyeballs in there.
Yeah, there's definitely too many eyeballs.
If they pull one over on us tonight, it's going to be very, very tilting.
We got boots on the ground with Mark at the game. Might fire him a text, ask him how DJ looks in the pregame. Yeah. Tell him to get his lazy ass inside the stadium.
Get him in there early.
You tell him we'll buy him a couple of White Claws early, okay? And he'll be in the stadium real quick.
His ass needs to be right in there, seeing who's with the ones. He needs all the reporting for us before he gets drunked up too.
That's true. But Tony, break down the receivers for us, because this is a huge position today. You talked about some of these cheapies in Bernard, and we obviously all think these Washington receivers are great, and I don't know. I think maybe embracing some variance here is maybe some of the best decision to take with Washington.
Yep. Like I said, it's pretty standard build. Everyone's going to want one or two of these receivers. Obviously, Rome and McMillan are the featured guys, but it's pretty simple, I think, where everyone's going to want one or two of those guys. Like Song said with Polk, he's just so expensive that he's not going to end up owned. And I can't say I disagree with it because he's clearly the third best guy. But, man, he's good too. They just have good receivers. And if he's going to be under-owned, I definitely want to be over in tournaments. If you just look at his game logs and don't watch the games, he's got ridiculous numbers for a number 3 receiver. And this is kind of where I lead into the whole Washington thing. Michigan has not seen a team like this. If they don't get pressure on Penix, he's going to dice this team up. I can promise you. And they got a good line. So I love these receivers, those 3. Polk's a good tournament play, but obviously everyone's going to love the 2 studs. McMillan looks like the most underpriced guy on the slate of the studs. Great captain play there. I have no disagreement with any of that. My favorite cheap play, like I said, is Jeremy. The last 2 games, first of all, he's 2,200, which we need salary savings. He can play a little out of the backfield. He's got a carry the last 3 games, which I know it's only 1 carry, but it's still a carry that other receivers aren't getting and different. He's a gadgety type guy. And he got 7 and 9 points the last 2 games, which doesn't sound great. I get it. But that was their 2 biggest games of the year, the playoff and the Pac-12 championship. 7, if you told me 8 points tonight, that was the number Slong used too. If you give me 8 from Jeremy, I'm basically locking him, I think. That's a lot of points from 2,200. It clears up the rest of your roster and everything. So he's my favorite cheapie. But all these Michigan cheapies too, Morris and Morgan, Culp, even from Washington, the tight end. I like all these cheapies. They're all in play to score touchdowns. Literally every one of them, which brings you back to roster construction. And that's just where I'm more on the passing games. You can just string these guys up where you get one quarterback with two receivers both ways. I feel pretty good about that. And I agree with the no 5. I like Washington tonight, but I agree with no 5-1s. There's going to be a couple guys, if not 3-3, the way it ends up. But these cheapies just line up nicely. And then at the top, like I said, I think the chalkiest guy of the slate outside of the studs is Cornelius. I mean, I think he's going to be way higher owned than anyone thinks. I think everyone's going to play him with the way the projections, which the way I play, I want to be under on him, and I want to be over on Roman, who's 9K. No one's going to play him. And I think he has upside. So I want to flip it a little bit there. I want to be over on Roman, under on Cornelius. And the cheap guys, I'm in on all of them, though. All these, I'm trying to see if I'm not on. Morris, Morgan, Barner. Barner's the other tight end, right, Bruce?
Yes.
Barner, yeah. So I like him, too. I mean, he's similar. Loveland's definitely better. Barner's more of a blocker. But Loveland is 6,400 and Barner's 1,600. That's quite a bit of difference. And I like both of them, though. Tight ends, like I said, in the past, tight ends have dominated. Even the year Clemson played LSU's Burrow team, I think, there was like a really cheap tight end from Clemson that started the game with like a 70-yard post pattern, and no one had him that year. So tight ends have been good to us at Run Pure, and I think these guys are all good plays tonight, these tight ends. So I don't know. I'm very high on the passing games tonight.
Well, none of that. You're just going to need studs tonight, right? This is an NFL showdown where we got like defenses and like all those mid-tier plays. So definitely
got to have the studs.
Yeah, you got to have the studs. We will not be playing any defenses tonight. That's going to be fun, right? If a defensive touchdown happens, no one's too upset, unless you have the quarterback and it knocks you down a little bit. But Bruce, why don't we talk about the kickers really quick? Is there a kicker that you have a preference towards? What's kind of your breakdown on that?
I think both are solid kickers. James Turner is kind of I think he's more of the NFL type kicker. So I have more interest there. But Gross looked good last week, I guess. He has a little bit of a leg, and supposedly a good story. I know they ran something, but I was too bummed about the game. I wasn't too excited to watch any kind of sob story about some kicker. So. But yeah, both are solid. I prefer Turner here. Like Big T said, they could outscore these projections. I'm a little bit higher than other sites on the projections too. So they could definitely score 12 or so, especially if they're getting stops. Both these teams don't allow like explosive plays. So if they're getting stopped 30 yards from the end zone, have to kick those 50-yarders. That's interesting for sure. I don't think these kickers are going to be super owned with some of the value pieces we have down there.
All right, Bryce, are you going to mix in kickers? Obviously, you're playing a ton of lineups, so I'm sure you'll have exposure to some. How are you handling the kickers?
I think I have like 15% of the Michigan guy and like 10% of the Washington guy. Tony will probably disagree with me here, but I never like college kickers. I think it'll be different, like if you do play kickers. So like I don't expect them to be as high owned as like NFL kickers in Showdown, but yeah, I mean, if people who don't know college football play like an NFL slate, I think the kickers are going to be over-owned. If they play it like a college slate, I think they'll be probably fairly owned. Like I also think it's hard to like click them over like Cornelius Johnson. Like say you're hand building teams, like you're going to take Cornelius over the Michigan kicker. So yeah,
that's like the example of why I like the kickers, though. I mean, the kickers have outscored this dump truck all year, and this dump truck's going to be 70%. The kickers are going to be like 12. It's crazy to me.
Yeah.
Why do you like him better? I don't know. Like, explain it.
I mean, if he scores a touchdown, he's what, like plus 250 vig free to score, he automatically beats them. You know, if he catches,
He doesn't automatically beat them.
I mean, if Cornelius scores a touchdown, I don't see a kicker outscoring him. You know, maybe I'm too low on the kickers here.
I mean, these kickers just look like they're just double-digit games. I mean, the Michigan kickers got like 7 of them, and the Washington guys got like 6 or 7 of them. Cornelius has like 2 of them. I don't get it, I guess.
So Bryce, this is the argument against you. In Cornelius Johnson's 1 touchdown game this year, right? Because he had the 1 touchdown, I think you guys said. Or actually, sorry, the Iowa game where he had 15. The kicker beat him in that one. Now let's see the 3 games earlier in the year. They were against nobody teams in Iowa, but I don't know. I think it happens more than you think. That's all. I don't think it's like a stone lock.
I also think that the Michigan kickers like points for the year are inflated because like these guys just score tons against the shitty fucking teams. Like in like a competitive game, you know, I don't like they're not going to score 7 touchdowns. He's not going to get 7 points from extra points. So I don't know. Maybe I'm too low on the kickers, but
it almost reminds me of shitty hitters and baseball playoffs showdown versus relief pitcher. Everyone always takes the hitter, the freaking Martin Maldonado, instead of the relief pitcher. And like when they get a hit, you're okay. But I don't know. It's an interesting debate for sure because I know everyone's going to play Cornelius, but I don't know. When you beat it, you're literally leveraging the whole field.
So my last run, I had Cornelius at 24%, and then the kickers at 15%. So
you got Cornelius,
it's not like
what?
I had him at 24% in my GPP.
You're going to be way under on Cornelius then.
Yeah. You know, I just like getting different down below, like you said earlier. Like I'm playing Bernard. I'm playing some of this Barner dude. Like I'm playing Morgan. You know, I think there are cheap plays that can outscore Cornelius for sure. Yeah, I'm just kind of like condensed a little more at the top because I feel pretty confident that like Corum or one of the Washington receivers will be the optimal captain. So that just lets me like spread it out a little more at the bottom.
All right. Tony, you talked a little about the kickers, but go back into some more depth on it. It sounds like you are going to be overweight on the kickers. And I don't know. I don't think it's going to take much for you to get overweight. It's not like you need to play 50% on one of these kickers.
Yeah, I mean, I just think they're under-owned. When I run the numbers, they're just not going to hit with these projections. I think they're going to end up like 12% owned, and I think they have a decent chance of Washington, in particular, moving the ball, stalling out, kicking field goals. I just think, man, if you get double digits from these price points, you're in pretty good shape. I don't think I'd play them together, and I would probably play it opposite of my captain in college. So, like, there are a couple weird rules. So, like, if I had McMillan or a Washington guy in the captain, I probably would play the Michigan kicker and then vice versa, just because of the scoring. Like, if you really get there with your nut on the captain, you want to be different. But I like both. I probably don't want both though on the same team, so I'd add that rule. Because the bad part about kickers, you don't have that ceiling you have with receivers. Receivers can always catch 2 touchdowns, break off a long one. You can't do that with kickers. But you don't always get those plays from the cheap guys to where you can beat it with 12 or 15. I think it's an interesting debate for sure tonight. But the one thing I for sure agree with Schlong, I love the cheapies. A couple of these cheapies are getting there. And they might beat Cornelius and the kickers, which is even better for us. So I totally agree with that. I'm loading up at the top, and I'm just jamming a bunch of these cheap guys in there. And that also goes towards more of the NBA showdown format where I don't see myself playing any cheap captains below. I mean, who would the lowest be? Probably McMillan, honestly. Maybe Loveland. Huh?
McMillan seems like the line. Like the
Maybe Loveland, just because I know Bruce is really good with the tight ends and he loves Loveland. But point being, I'm not going super low for captain. I want a good guy in the captain. And
Yeah.
when Corum or when Penix or when one of these receivers gets in the 30s, it's just impossible to win with a cheapie unless you get like 15 from a 1,200 guy or something. Then maybe you could do it. Like I know Hofbrau shipped a ton the one year with the backup tight end, just because he got like 14 or something in that game. It can happen. I just prefer to just jam the studs and try to get different at the bottom.
Yep, I'm with you. I think getting different with the studs makes a lot of sense, or not with the studs, with the cheapies makes a lot of sense. And hey, there's a lot to get different with, right? That's one of the key parts as well. Bruce, I guess let's go to plays of the day, and we'll also follow up the plays of the day with who we think is going to win the game. Also, Redmond's in the chat. How many times was the Michigan kicker in a dome? That is another good factor, right? This game is in a dome. That is going to at least help this game too in a lot of different ways. So keep that in mind as well.
The main objection I have to the whole kicker thing is I just don't understand the projections. Like and the flip side is what Schlong said, though. Like they're not playing a team they're going to get 7 extra points and all that. But like they've outscored their projection all year, every game. It's just like I think there's points tonight too, which means there's going to be a lot of opportunity for kickers too. So I just don't agree with the projection is what more than anything I disagree with.
Yeah, if you look at like college projections for kickers, most places just throw 6 or 7 in there.
And don't even
That's
look
what,
at it. They
yeah.
just pop it in there.
Yeah,
That's kind of
what I
my
see.
point. Like it just looks like that. It looks like it when you project it. I don't see how you could project these guys for less than 10.
Yeah, it's possible. This Turner guy's 6 of 9 on field goals over 40 yards, and I think he's only missed 150 plus. So, he can hit those deep ones as well. Now he's in a dome, like Redmond mentioned. So that's interesting too.
For sure. But Bruce, who do you got winning the game? And then, as best as you can do with plays of the day. Obviously, there's 4 of us giving them out, but we're not going to all just give out some sneaky low on guy or something.
Yeah. I like Washington to win the game tonight. I just think Penix is too good, and they're not able to get pressure on him, and he picks them apart. I'm going to go with Polk as my play of the day, just because he's going to be lower owned, and I like having a lot of him in tournaments.
There you go. Bryce, you're up next. Who do you got? Who's your play of the day, and who's winning the game?
I know Mark is heavy on Michigan. I think they're probably the right side here. I just think they're too good. My play of the day, not a captain. Give me J.J. McCarthy at flex. I think he goes super under-owned in the flex. I mean, the dude can run a bit too, and if he's running, he's directly taking points away from Corum. So I think he's a really good guy to be over on in the flex. At captain, give me a Dunze. Guy's a stud, and I think if Penix is able to get there, it's going to be through him and McMillan and Polk. But I like a Dunze the best of the bunch.
All right, Big T, you're up next. Who do you got play of the day, and who is winning the game?
Yeah, I saw Mark put Michigan up. I knew he was going to because last week he was in our other thread talking about it, and I don't like disagreeing with him in games like this, but I really like Washington a lot. I feel great about it. I just think Michigan has not seen an attack like this. I think they're going to spread them out. You got 3 NFL receivers. You got an NFL quarterback that's freaking older than me, that's seen everything. I think they're ready. I think they're going to shred them. And I think Michigan got really lucky against Alabama, more lucky than people realize. That they couldn't move the ball. Bama just had no receivers. They haven't faced a team all year like this. Ohio State, you look at some of the teams they've faced that have had receivers. Even the Maryland game, they had them freaking beat. They were in that game. And I think it's actually a mismatch too. I won't be surprised if they win by like 2 touchdowns tonight. I think Michigan's one-dimensional. I absolutely love Washington tonight.
All right. For me, play of the
On
day.
my play, though, I forgot. I got my play. I got on a tangent.
yeah.
My play is for sure Jeremy. He's my favorite cheapie, and he fits all the builds. Obviously I like all the studs, the same as everybody. So to get a little different, Jeremy is definitely my play of the day.
All right, for me, the play of the day is going to be McMillan. It's going to be him in captain. I love him in the captain spot. I think it gives you a nice little construction. And then for the winner, Bruce, we're going back to when we used to do these shows from day one, right? You told me there's this quarterback from Indiana, lefty. I absolutely love him. He's amazing. Never heard anything, and called him Mr. Penix or Mr. Penis, right? As we joked about the first start.
Big penis.
Yeah, and he's going to whip it out. He's going to whip his schlong all over the Michigan Wolverines and get the job done. So give me the Huskies to win. Should be a fun game regardless. I'm excited for it. It's just a battle of what?
It's going to be a fun game for sure.
Yeah.
No doubt about it.
Yeah, those were the days of Wap Filior and Ty Freifogel and Peyton Hendershot.
Getting 400 targets each week.
Yeah, and they beat Michigan one year, I think 2020, 36-21 or something. So he has history beating Michigan in his past.
Yep. And hey,
I wanted to talk about one last thing before you get it out too. Bruce posted this link in the chat, but this Giles Jackson, I didn't realize that he was that pissed at the Michigan. So that's yet another cheapie, like we were talking about. I mean, he's 3,200, but he's got a little bad blood. You never know when they try to have a little gadget play for him to just shove it up old Harbaugh's backside. So I like those just little things in the cheapies that he posted.
Tony, have you looked him in the eye? Do you know if he wants it or no?
Just by that video that Bruce posted, I think he wants it. I do. I think he wants it. Looking at his eyes.
So sometimes they want it. Also, Rubio, if you're still watching, you put the pants back on. There was a Peyton Hendershot reference on this show. I did not see coming today. He loves himself some Peyton Hendershot. You too, Kurt, as well. But that is going to wrap it up for us. We got the NBA Hardwood show coming up in 30 minutes. So I'm going to go to the bathroom real quick, maybe grab a little snack and then get ready for some NBA with the people. I'll be back with AP and DC. We'll be breaking all that down. Then we'll go right into those cores. We'll go right into the college football, and then we're going to sweat out the games and have a good time. So, and Rubio can confirm he celebrated when he heard about Peyton Henderson. That is going to wrap it up for us on the college football show. Thanks a lot for joining us. For me, Mango and Bruce, Third Inch Long, Big T, and Snyder's Soldiers, of course, always with us every single week. We'll see you guys later.